Good morning and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bluddworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today is a continuation of my first look and flip through of the Dungeon Master's Guide for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd Edition. So in my last video, I had a little bit of an audio hiccup, and a good portion of the forward kind of got messed up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to revisit the forward and kind of correct the error that was in the last video, because one of the commenters on my channel had suggested that I do that and go back over the forward, because he felt it was extremely important to read this through. So I wanted to address that issue, and after reading the forward through a second time myself, I do notice where he's coming from, and I agree with it. So without further ado, let's jump to the forward, and then I will skip ahead to the section of the book where we left off. So let's switch views here. Okay, so, and let me size this down a little bit because it's a little bit much. Let's try that. So, so here's the forward to the 2nd edition, written by David Zeb Cook on February 9th of '89. Oh my gosh, it's almost the anniversary. I should have done this video tomorrow. But anyway, a forward is normally the place where the author of a book expresses thanks and gratitude. I'm not going to do that here. It's not that everyone involved doesn't deserve congratulations and praise. It's just that I already said all of those things in the forward of the AD&D Player's Handbook. Everything I said there is true for this book, too. On to other things. Let's assume that since you're reading this, you are or plan to be a dungeon master. By now, you should be familiar with the rules in the Player's Handbook. You probably already noticed things you like or things you would have done differently. If you have, congratulations. You've got the spirit every dungeon master needs. As you go through this rulebook, I encourage you to continue to make these choices. Choice is what the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons game is all about. We've tried to offer you what we think are the best choices for your AD&D campaign, but each of us has different likes and dislikes. The game that I enjoy may be quite different from your own campaign, but it is not for me to say what is right or wrong for your game. True, I and everyone working on the AD&D game have had to make fundamental decisions, but we've tried to avoid being dogmatic and inflexible. The AD&D game is yours. It's mine. It's every player's game. So, is there an official AD&D game? Yes, but only when there needs to be. Although I don't have a crystal ball, it's likely that tournament and other official events will use all of the core rules in these books. Optional rules may or may not be used, but it's fair to say that all players need to know them, even if they don't have them memorized. The Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide give you what you're expected to know, but that doesn't mean the game begins and ends there. Your game will go in directions not yet explored, and your players will try things others think strange. Sometimes these strange things will work, sometimes they won't. Just accept this, be ready for it, and enjoy it. Take the time to have fun with the AD&D rules. Add, create, expand, and extrapolate. Don't just let the game sit there, and don't become a rules lawyer worrying about each piddly little detail. If you can't figure out the answer, make it up. And whatever you do, don't fall into the trap of believing these rules are complete. They are not. You cannot sit back and let the rule book do everything for you. Take the time and effort to become not just a good DM, but a brilliant one. At conventions and letters and over the phone, I'm often asked for an instant answer to a fine point of the game rules. More often than not, I come back with a question. What do you feel is right? And the people asking the question discover that not only can they create an answer, but that their answer is as good as anyone else's. The rules are only guidelines. At the beginning of the first Dungeon Master's Guide, Gary Gygax stressed that each of us, working from a common base, would make the AD&D game grow in a variety of different directions. That is more true today than ever. Don't be afraid of experimentation, but do be careful. As a dungeon master, you have a great power, and with great power comes great responsibility. Use it wisely. So, as I was saying, and as that commenter was kind of pointing out, this is a very important point to make, and David Zeb Cook does it, incredibly well. I recently had an argument with someone on Twitter that Rule 0 is, and this is his words, Rule 0 is fake and it's gay, which I don't know what the heck that means, but he had argued that no good DM uses Rule 0, which is an utter defiance of what this just said here in the forward. Rule 0 just simply means you as the DM decide which optional rules you might use, what you might change about the official rules, whatever you decide that will make the gaming experience better at your table, all right, is what's best to use. I mean, that's basically what David Zeb Cook is saying. What feels right for your table? The other responsibility part that he's talking about is that, without him explicitly saying it, is that your responsibility as a DM is to make sure that your players know what rules you're using. So you have to be transparent, you have to be consistent, and you have to be fair. All right? You're not going to have some rules for some characters and a totally different rule set for other characters, obviously unless their character class or race, make that important distinction. But but you're going to make sure that the players know the rules or know what you're using and home brewing in your own campaign. You have to be consistent, so you have to evenly apply it and consistently apply it. You can't have an initiation, an initiative rule in one combat and then, well, we're not going to do that the next time if the situation is fairly the same anyway. So it's just, there is a responsibility to homebrewing your own rule set and your players knowing what they are. And players should have some voice as well. So if the players are experiencing one of your homebrews and they're all pretty much uniformly saying, we don't agree with this or we don't like this way of playing, as a DM, you should consider, all right, well, I'll modify this, make it a little bit different so that your players are buying in. Because if your players are not buying into your homebrew, they're not going to buy into your campaign and they're not going to want to play in that campaign any longer. So that's the other portion. So thank you very much for having me go back over this again. Hopefully the audio hiccup doesn't happen at 8:30 in the morning that it was at noon. So that's usually an internet lag that occurs. Without further ado, let's get back to where I left off. And I'm going to keep this video short, so there will be a part 3 of Dungeon Master's Guide, flip through. So there's the forward. So let's go to where we left off. And I am going to... Oh my gosh. I went way beyond. Chapter 9 now. We're going to go to spells. Or magic, I should say. Magic. Here we go. Chapter 7, Magic. So of all the areas of AD&D game that will be called upon to judge, Magic is perhaps the most diverse and demanding. Magic allows characters to break all the natural laws of the universe, a situation that can lead to unforeseen but highly exciting situations. Be sure you understand how magic works in AD&D game and the different ways you can control its use. Initial magic spells. So you have various rules for initial magic spells. And we will get to some of those. So there's player choice. The simplest way is to give wizard spells is to throw the ball back into the player's court and ask him what spells he would like. As he names spells, have them roll to see if the character can learn it. All right, so that's one way that you can do it, and they just go through and they make that roll to see if they know that that particular spell. Then there is DM's choice. You can automatically give the player character read magic and detect magic and 4 other spells of your choice. This starts all player characters with the same number of spells. While it's not necessarily to give each character the same spells, you should see that everyone has roughly the same balance of power. No rules to learn these need to be made. The character is assumed to have mastered them during his apprenticeship. I kind of like that rule, and it's something. It's something in my own campaign. I had the character. I had the player actually check to see which spells that he had access to, and he got to pick 2 that he wanted. But actually, I would certainly use this and say, well, all magic users are going to start off with read magic, which makes sense, and detect magic. So I'm going to go back actually and alter that for my player character magic user, and let him know. Player DM collaboration, acquisition of spells beyond first level. So once a character has begun adventuring, he won't be able to have additional spell books instantly appear each time he goes up a level. Instead, the player character must find some way to get additional higher level spells. As with initial spells, there are several ways that this can be done. Any of these can be used in your campaign. So when you gain a level, there are various ways that you can pick up spells, new spells. So there's copying from spell books, which is, oh wait, I skipped one, let's see. First, whenever a character attains a new spell level, allow the player 1 new spell immediately. You can choose this spell, let the player choose it, or select it randomly. The rationale behind this is simple. All the long hours of study and reading the character has been doing finally gels and in something real and understandable. No roll is needed to learn this spell unless you allow the character to choose it. If the character is a specialist in a school of magic, the new spell should come from that school if there is a spell available. Copying from spell books. The second way to acquire new spells is to copy them from the spell books of other wizards. I tend not to do this or allow this because wizards tend to be fairly protective of what spells they have, what spells they know, and they're protective of not wanting others to know what their capabilities are. Scroll research. So a third a character can research a spell using a scroll with the same spell as the base. The time and cost require the research is half the normal, and the player character must still check to see if he can learn the spell. Regardless of success or failure of the research, the scroll is destroyed, and the wizard had to read it aloud to analyze the effects. And that's something that I've done before. And that's a quick and easy way while on an adventure for a character to pick up new spells. Studying with a mentor is another one that I am very fond of doing. So fourth, and only if you allow it, the wizard can return to his old mentor and with luck copy new spells out of a master spell book. All right, and that's the only time that I let them copy from a master spell book or another wizard's spell book. Usually I have the mentor provide the character with a scroll and not direct access to his or her spell book. And I allow this, or I allow the mentorship for all character classes to really end after level 5, where they no longer need a mentor to actually move them up, and now their accumulated knowledge of their own class allows them to move forward without a direct mentor. DM control of spell acquisition. Characters acquiring new spells, always remember that you are in charge. You have a complete control over the spells the player characters get. If a player character has a spell you don't like, or one that severely disrupts or unbalances your game, it is not the player's fault. Who gave the character the spell? Who allowed it in the game? Control spell acquisition is an important responsibility. Consider your choices carefully. Yeah, so you as the DM, you're responsible for almost everything that the players acquire for their characters. Whether it be spells or treasure items, magic items and such, and if you end up giving them something that really disrupts your game, it's your fault. And I wouldn't go about looking to remove that power or item from the players, explicitly, like I'm just going to unfairly take this away from you in some way, but I would instead try to work around it for a while, and then and then hopefully the players will either find new ways of using it or grow tired of using it themselves and go with something else. So I mean, you do have a big responsibility in what kind of spells and items and such that you allow your players to have access to. Spell books, all sizes and shapes. I kind of like this. I've never seen this before. Again, this is my first look through. And when I first saw this table 5 minutes ago, I was like, okay, now I kind of know what each spell book and size and such could possibly have. And so a standard spell book for first level will have between 16 and 100 spells. That's a huge number of spells. A scroll might have 4 to 25. Again, that's a large number of spells to have on scroll. I mean, 4 is kind of the top end that I've seen. So your traveling spell book is between 8 and 50 spells. Again, I like that idea that a traveling book is much smaller, so roughly half the size of a standard book, because the standard book of a spell book is really something that's quite large. It's like the it's like those books that you've seen that are 3 feet long and 2 feet wide kind of thing. So in many cases, it's like the size of a small shield. That a player character is just, especially a wizard, is not going to be carrying this thing and around, on his back or on his hip or in a pouch or anything like that. It's the travel book is a much smaller and useful, more portable item. Schools of Magic. So this is something I really like about second edition as opposed to the first edition, is that now your characters can your magic using characters can either be a jack of all schools and have a little bit of everything, kind of your first edition kind of magic user, or you can specialize in certain schools. And I really like that idea of having a certain amount of specialization. And so you kind of create a theme for your magic user. So that's something that, you used to have to do that on your own and kind of, create that sort of theme. And the last magic user character I was doing, I kind of did that. I kind of made him a fire magic magic user, and second edition just gives you that from the jump. And one of the things in the acquiring spells, which I believe I mentioned, was that when you acquire that new that new spell for hitting a new level, it comes from the school of magic of your choice. Or the one that you're following. So I kind of like that. That's a good addition, let's say, to the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons magic system. Setting spell levels, determining spell components, optional rule, and such. So all of this is still first edition issues. Whether you're using spell components and that's an optional rule and such. I tend to like to use spell components. Experience. So this chapter contains instructions for determining specific experience awards. It also gives guidelines about awarding experience in general. However, it does not provide absolute mathematical formulas for calculating experience in every situation. Awarding experience points is one of the DM's most difficult jobs. The job is difficult because there are only a few rules and a lot of guidelines for the DM to rely on. The DM must learn nearly everything he knows about experience points from running game sessions. There is no magical formula or die roll to determine if he is doing the right or wrong thing. Only time, instinct, and player reactions will tell. The importance of experience. It is often said that the AD&D game is not a winners and losers game. This is true. The AD&D game is not a game in which one time. There is winning and losing based on how well the group plays and how well it achieves the goals set for it. This does not mean that individuals in the group compete against each other, winning and losing, or that different groups of players compete against each other, as in football. If anything, an AD&D game player competes against himself. He tries to improve his role-playing and to develop his character every time he plays. Experience points are a measure of this improvement, and the number of points given a player for the game session is a signal of how well the DM thinks the player did in the game, a reward for good role-playing. As with any other reward system, there are potential problems. Too little or too much. If the DM consistently gives too little experience to players, they become frustrated. Frustrated players don't have fun and usually quit the game. Even if they don't quit, players can develop an "it doesn't matter what I do, so why bother" attitude. They stop trying to do their best, figuring they will only get a measly amount of experience whether they play their best or just coast along. On the other hand, players can be given too many experience points too quickly. Players in this situation develop "it doesn't matter what I do because I'm going to win" attitude. They quit trying to be inventive and clever, and they just get by. So, constant goals. 3 goals are constant: fun, character survival, and improvement. Each of these should be possible in a single game session. If anyone is missing, player enjoyment decreases. So, fun, and this is, an interesting thing. You can give experience points based on the amount of fun that's going on. Did the player actively get involved in the game? Did the player make the game fun for others and make fun at their expense? Was the player disrupting or interfering with the flow of the game? Was the player argumentative or a rules lawyer? So they have both positives and negatives in here. Character survival. Although having a character live from the game session to game session is a reward in itself, a player should also receive experience points when his character survives. There are many ways to bring a dead character back into the game. The threat of death, while present, loses some of the sting. Players should be encouraged to try to keep their characters alive instead of relying on resurrection and wishes. To this end, a small reward for making it through the game session is useful. It is a direct way of telling the player that he played well. My own experience as a player very early on is that generally speaking, when our player characters died, they died. It was that threat of death was always there, and we did not have access to resurrection spells, and we did not have access, obviously, to wishes, which are extremely rare. I don't know about 5e, but I do know in earlier editions, first edition AD&D, which is the one that I played the most, we didn't have access to that. That's just possibly at my own table. So improvement. Experience points are one measure of the character's improvement, and they translate directly to the game mechanics. However, players should also improve by trying to play more intelligently at each session. And there are variable goals, so there are story goals. So if you meet certain goals, you can also gain additional experience points. If you fail those goals, you're not going to lose experience points, you're just not going to gain experience points. Although in failure you can learn some things from it, I wouldn't necessarily make that experience points, though. That's more meta than actually in the game. Let's see what they say here. Sometimes they might not have a clear idea of what I'm reading this last paragraph down here. Sometimes a DM might not have a clear idea of what the goal of the particular adventure is. In such case, the players can sometimes provide a goal or at least a clue. Listen to what they think or they're supposed to. All right, so it's not dealing with what if they don't achieve some goal yet. So there's group awards, which is generally the most common, where you take, especially like experience points based on treasure gained, and you kind of split that across the board. Creature experience points. Now, many people, I think, many DMs have gotten away from doing this individualized creature experience points. And they've done more encounter experience points, or they've done a more phased in experience points. So milestones or hitting certain benchmarks in an adventure. Completing chapters of an adventure would dish out a number of experience points. So, like I said, I don't know anybody that still does, well, you killed 6 orcs, and so you're going to get, 15 experience points for each. I don't know anybody that still does that. Individual experience point awards, optional rules. So warriors per hit dice of creatures defeated get 10 times the level, 10 XP times the level. The priest would get 100 XP per successful use of a granted power. Spellcast to further an ethos, 100 XP per spell level. Wizards get 50 per spell level. Rogues get 200 experience points for each use of a special ability and such. Just very crunchy. I would again go to awarding experience points based on various components of the adventure. And if let's say they enter this room, and this room has its major feature is a trap, and the rogue goes in and disarms the trap. Even though he is the one that actually disarmed the trap, the entire group is going to get the experience of having, gotten past that particular room. And so, so it becomes more of a group experience. Now, I might, as a DM, want to record that the rogue has, in fact, done one of his special, abilities. And just keep that in mind if there is later on a skill point use where it says, well, you know what, you did a phenomenal job at disarming traps during this adventure. So those experience points, you can add them directly to your disarming traps skill level, rather than just in a general pool of skills. The effects of experience. So the main one is going up in level. Obviously, training is an optional rule, and like I said, I would have player characters return to their mentors or somebody of higher level than themselves, up to level 5, and then thereafter they can self-train themselves. The rate of advancement is really up to the DM, how fast he or she wants their characters in their player party to advance. Oh, excuse me, to advance. So there's a lot of decisions going on in here. I am going to save combat for the next, because I know combat is going to get quite involved. So as you can see, there's a lot here. There's a lot that you can, as a DM, you should read through this and read through it a few times to really get that idea of, well, this is what I'm going to use. There's many options in here, so different ways that you can use these things. So from magic acquisition to how you're going to deal out experience points. These are decisions that you're not going to make as they come up. These are decisions that you're going to make as a DM before the game session starts, before the campaign starts. And I would let the players know that this is what you're using, and, ahead of time. So that's a session 0 kind of conversation that you have with your players. Is, oh, you're the magic user. This is how you're going to gain magic. Everybody, up from levels 1 through 5, you are going to maintain an access to a mentor for that training. This is how I'm going to deal with experience points. So you're not going to get experience points, every single combat kill that you've got, or every single spell that you've cast, or special ability that you've used, either failure or successful. And I'm going to use milestones instead, all right, or accumulated experience points from everybody's actions in each of those sessions, and then spread it out that way. So there's a lot to make decisions here, a lot of decisions to be made in just these 2 sections. And like I said, combat is going to be a whole different video, and I'm really going to dig into that. Now that section I'm actually going to read ahead of time so that I kind of know what I'm talking about. So that's not going to be a first look, but more so an overview of the combat system of 2nd edition, because I think it will be that important to do, and we'll see how it goes from there. So once again, thank you for joining. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the questions and comments section. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Particularly if you really like the video, please share it out there. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. I produce videos, once every 3-4 days maximum. At least I try to do it at least every 3 or 4 days. I'll put out a new one. So the combat video that I'm going to focus on will come out in a couple of days. And then I still add other things into the channel as well. Other game systems. I have another Kickstarter video that I'm going to do, and that will probably be next. And then I have another game review that I just picked up the game, so I want to do that soon as well. So part 3 of this will probably be in about 4 days, and you might get another video sometime in between today and that, unrelated to Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. So once again, thanks for joining. You have a great day. Be safe out there. Start of a new week, day after Super Bowl Sunday. So if you watched the game, I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't watch the game, I hope you used your Sunday evening productively. So have a great day and take care.